Um, so I hope everybody is having a wonderful day. Trying to make sure that I am getting everything where I want it. It's a kind of a new setup for my phone, and so I'm trying to make sure that I've got it. Plus, I'm trying to do other things while I do this because I'm trying to. I always have to utilize my time, and I find that if I'm doing other things, it makes it a little bit easier for me to focus on this too because I have that like need to fit, and so I just find different ways to fidget, and I find if I'm doing things, well, I'm more productive. Um, this is going to be my weekly scheduled live. I have been in several other times. I've gone live even with my daughter once or twice. I'll still be doing other things, but this is the one schedule that I'll be having currently. And basically what I'd like to do, I'll probably come up with different ideas and different topics, but I think the main focus is what I really was started on, or I was first doing was just taking different new knowledges that we have, getting that new knowledge that we have out to people, right? Because I think that a lot of people aren't knowledge isn't as easily accessible as we want it to be, right? Like it's a lot more easily accessible now that we have the internet than it's ever been in the past. But it's also still problematic on a lot of levels, right? So many things are hidden, or so many things are put out in a way that makes you not understand them, or so many things are get kept behind cost. So many things are, put out in ways that are just not feasible for grasping knowledge. Knowledge is one of those things that has been gate kept, like from the very early times. Knowledge has been gate kept to our understanding. At least earliest written record of knowledge shows knowledge being kept. I think, hey, Wicked, I think that knowledge actually goes way back before that, of course. But I think that even in our earliest accessible understanding of the way we treated knowledge earlier, we see that there's some gatekeeping with it. And we see that the internet has given us a greater capacity to reach knowledge and to find things, but there's still a lot of money involved, right? It's not free for a lot of people. And one thing that I think that a lot of people, quite frankly, a lot of people in the United States fail to understand is that the vast majority of the United States is living on the less than paycheck to paycheck. The vast majority of the United States is either without a house or a step above. And for the United States, the vast majority of the United States that is with either without a house or a step above from without a house, um, it has been struggling for a long time, right? The idea that we have this, that capitalism provides this vast opportunity for us to always have advancement, ignoring the fact that those in charge are always going to want to try and maintain power because power tries to maintain itself. That's one of the things about power, right? And so when we have kind of failed in that understanding, right? We kind of think that everybody has equal access, and that's not true. And we find, especially here within the United States, that unless you're born with a lot of advantages in place, you don't have the ability to really get them. But one of those advantages is light of skin. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that's your culture, but one of those advantages being light of skin. And so, for people whose advantage is being light of skin and who have utilized that advantage and have utilized that advantage for generations, it's hard to see that other people, uh, no matter what advantages they have, skin or not, or whether or not there's access to supposed free education or things like that, don't have those advantages and are living in vast poverty. Really is the bluntest and easiest way to say it, right? Yes, Christopher, absolutely. I think though that what is unique within the United States is that, well, the vast majority of the world acknowledges that there is poverty within their countries. The United States thinks that every other country is impoverished and we are rich. And because we believe that every other country is impoverished, and we are rich, we have a large population that believes that everybody in this country benefits from that richness when very few people in this country benefit from that richness. And we have a vast portion of the population that does not understand or acknowledge that we are actually a third world country on some levels. Like, not only are there spaces of our country that are third world, right? There are spaces, there are reservations that are third world, the care and the lack of access to things and the treatment has created an environment where you might as well be walking through a space in any other third world space, right? um, and absolutely within Black neighborhoods. There are in food deserts within impoverished neighborhoods. We find that there are vast spaces that are unknown of by the larger population, right? And as large long as the larger population is unknowing of it and is willfully ignorant of that, we find that vast tracts of understanding are kept from the public sphere, correct? Which is a couple of things that I'm talking about today. And the reason that I'm talking about all of that is, well, we're in this beautiful movement forward of bringing forth knowledge of what has happened to Black people within this country. And we are in this beautiful movement forward of listening to Black and Indigenous, or to Black women and to Black voices. There are only a very few spaces that we're actually listening to Indigenous voices as well. And I'm not asking you to listen to my Indigenous voice, because my Indigenous voice, I like it to be small. It deserves to be small. It's supposed to be small. My lane is small, right? But there is a lack of understanding of Indigenous reality in this country, as much as there is a lack of understanding of other realities. And as we are moving forward to understand those other realities, we also have to understand Indigenous reality, right? Um, so when we're looking at, it gets me a little distracted. When we are looking at the fact that um, within Indigenous reality, um, a large and vast knowledge of history that was never lost, that has been passed down, is being ignored. So currently in Miami, there is an archaeological site that is a continuously occupied city that goes back 7,000 years. To put this in perspective, that is older than Mesopotamia, that is older than that is older than any other, not any other city in the world, but any other of the cities in the world that we look at as cultural civilization centers. We do have a city that predates that I know of, but we really only have one city that predates that I personally know of, and that would be Angazal, a city that I frequently talk about, which is about 10,000 years ago. So it only predates it by 1,000 years. So that's 8,000 years BCE. Maybe let me double check that dating and make sure that they're not talking years ago in the article instead of BCE in the article, just to make sure my double check. Okay, years ago. So we are talking about 5,000 BCE. So again, this is predating Mesopotamia and but the other one that we look at, Angazal, is 10,000 years old. In predating both Mesopotamian and it is also predating, to my knowledge, I want to make sure. So there is a Saqqara cemetery that goes back pretty far within Egypt, but there's not an associated city continuous date there. Though even with Mesopotamia, the continuous date is a little bit iffy. So in perspective, this puts this on par or before any other can eh, foundational city that we can think of within civilization foundation. Again, the first city that we see as an agricultural based city is 10,000 years ago as Engazal, which dissolves within 300 years and is not built back up. We do not see Mesopotamia, or any of those until um, 6,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. And I believe that our oldest knowledge of Kemet cities, Egypt cities, is 4,000 BCE, which would be 6,000 years ago. But there might be one before that, and I'm not pulling it in my head what it would be. But the thought that there might be doesn't seem to push it back more than to 5,000 BCE, because my knowledge of the oldest thought process of Egypt's continued occupation is about 5,000, but it might be 4,000. Like, I have to double check my dates on it. So, just because I want to make sure that my dating is all correct and that I'm making sure that the information that I'm getting out to you is information that um, is as accurate as I can make it. Please always understand that this is information that we have now. Information changes, especially in the field of archaeology and anthropology. Currently, it is changing on literally a daily and hourly basis for so many people. Um, I'm very fortunate enough to have grown up within an environment that knew a lot of things that Western thought does not. And so, because I was brought up in an environment that did not look so much at Western thought, um, though I, of course, had to attend some Western schools, because I was in because I was fortunate enough to look at non-Western thought growing up, I can see that these things were already there. Like, I already had knowledge that a lot of these things existed. I've already known that there was older civilizations than we want to think about. This city in Miami currently, they are finding it is continuously occupied from 7,000 years ago, which means 5,000 BCE. And that at 2,000 years ago, they have a significant monument. Let me double check on what exactly it is. And I'm not seeing that they're saying what it is, but it is showing that there is a significant city or leadership, ruler type, not like that. Because I think that they're associating it with a specific human being, but I could be, they don't have the information on that monument. Like, this article isn't about that. I have a picture of it. The landmark to the top here that you can see, that's a circle with a path leading to it, is 2,000 years old. This is the Miami Circle National Historic Landmark, thought to be around 2,000 years old. So that's what's up on top there, and that's 2,000 years old. The dig on the bottom that you're seeing, which is a construction site like most of these are, the dig on the bottom that you're seeing is a construction site that has found artifacts in the dig of the testing of the construction site that are 7,000 years old. The 7,000 years old monuments, including a spearhead, and they included spearhead plant remnants, and vestiges of ancient structures and human remains. This, again, all dating back to 7,000 years ago, is a continuously occupied city. So what we have, hello to Great, is a continuously occupied city based in Miami, in the area in Miami, indigenous people in Miami, dating back to before Mesopotamia and Ur, with a significant site that is at the same timeline as Rome. So Why is this significant? If you're in Turtle Island, if you're here in, uh, especially within the United States, there is a lot of blockage of information about Indigenous people. There is a belief that Indigenous people are extinct. There is a belief that Indigenous people were here, but now they are cartoon characters or monuments and museums. Um, and there is a belief that Turtle Island Indigenous people were primitive. Our idea of what primitive is. And our idea of what primitive is states that there's a lack of intelligence. It doesn't state that there's a lack of knowledge, which is what it should mean, right? All right. Like there's a lack of knowledge, and it's all those tools that gave you the tools you have today because somebody had to come up with the original, right? But what it does show, or what our idea of primitive states, is that it's a lack of intelligence, and it's not. Our idea of primitive is not what ancestral people were like. That's why we're moving away from the idea of primitive as a verbiage. There's a better word, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, so I'm not going to use it today. But when we look at Turtle Island Indigenous people pre-colonization, there's this idea that they are not as advanced. And this lack of advancement idea comes from that white supremacist thought process that states that advancement is big cities, that states that advancement is leaving your mark, right? That's only idea of what civilization is does it leave an impactful mark on the world around it? Whereas many groups of people who don't live in as egotistical of a societal ideology, who do not need to be the best, right? Those groups of people did not need to leave extensive remains in concrete to be found thousands of years later, did not need to be gods, did not need to be permanent, did not need to be eternal, right? And if you have no need to be eternal, then the mark that you leave is small. So finding it millions or thousands or hundreds of years later is hard because you weren't trying to impact the world around you. You were trying to live within the biome that you're a part of. Okay. So when we are looking at these things, we really need to look at that. And finds like this really show that. Finds like this are more evidence of how cultures that are pre-Western thought, that do not have that need to leave an indelible fingerprint on the land to see forever, right? Um, exist. And not only do they exist, but in this case, we're showing the Miami people are still here today, right? First of all, again, there is this idea that Turtle Island Indigenous people are extinct, and Turtle Island Indigenous people are not extinct. Okay. There are vast, beautiful, thriving Turtle Island Indigenous cultures who are absolutely working in resilience against the shit that's being tossed at them by the government and the peoples around them, right? But Turtle Island Indigenous people are absolutely thriving and still here, still a part of us, right? Not only a part of us, but as our original people. Again, I don't want y'all to fucking listen to me. I don't want y'all to follow me. This is not my point. That's not my thing. I mean, like, that's not it. But how are we out there going, we need to listen to, this voice and we need to listen to that voice? And we're not saying we need to listen to Indigenous women first. The first people here. That's who we should be listening to first and foremost and always. It's theirs, their understanding of this space. And it wasn't lost and it wasn't stolen, right? It was stolen, but it wasn't removed, right? It wasn't removed. There are spaces here in Turtle Islands, in South America, especially, even in spaces within North America where people have been able to escape, where people never lost their histories, never lost their lifeways. There are people still living Indigenous lifeways in South America, right? And there are people, and those are people that we know of, like in the news, like we know this. This is common knowledge, right? There are people who live within different spaces that you can disappear in the Pacific Northwest or in, up in northern parts of Turtle Island, right? That have never lost had never had that disconnect, never had it stolen, never lost their children, that were able to pull away, right? So why are we not listening to people whose stories and thought process can trace back 7,000 years of continuous civilization and occupation? The Miami people, I do not know personally Miami people, so I cannot say specifically, but I do know that the Miami people still are a people today. And I do know that this is the area, this is why it's named for them, right? So this is their continuous occupation of an area for 7,000 years until Turtle Island was invaded by foreigners who forcibly removed them and put them in concentration camps. Because I was watching a show today, the first concentration camps were done in some foreign Italy country. It wasn't Germany, it was something before Germany. And I'm like, no, boo. The first concentration camps were done in Turtle Island in the reservations. That is our first concentration camps. And that's another thing that we have to acknowledge. We have to look at. We have to listen to people and see is happening, right? We ignore a Holocaust on this soil and speak out about every genocide on foreign soil we get our name into. When are we going to stop the genocide on this soil? Every genocide on foreign soil we get our name into. When are we stopping the genocide on this soil? Right? So, again, Turtle Island Indigenous people, if you've seen any of my other lives, you'll have heard that we have evidence of Turtle Island Indigenous. We have evidence of what would be Homo erectus or a speciation of Homo erectus at 130,000 years old with the Cerruti mastodon find in San Diego, California. This would be erectus or a descendant of erectus because Homo sapien isn't really out of Africa before this. Because this would be an erectus or a descendant of Homo erectus, we not only are finding evidence within the Cerruti mastodon find, but we find evidence in the fact that Turtle Island Indigenous people have a unique DNA or a unique ghost species. Hi, Mish. Sorry, I didn't have that one up. A unique ghost species that isn't found anywhere else. The species that we see in our DNA are all other Homo erectus descendants. And so this will double down in scientific terms the idea that there is a unique species that was created here in Turtle Island from Homo erectus, speciated here in Turtle Island from Homo erectus. And because we see that unique species speciating in Turtle Island from Homo erectus, what we're seeing is that unique species speciating from Homo erectus here in Turtle Island gives the knowledge that some groups have of having speciated here, having been created here. I'm going to turn on comments for a moment. I don't know who you were who asked to go live, and I don't bring people up that I don't know. It's just a safety issue for me. And it's not usually a discussion where I have people come up unless we've had agreed upon things that we're working on. But I will open up comments if you wanted to say something, and that's why you were trying to go live. Only probably for a brief bit, because unfortunately the comments can get extremely nasty in here, and they are extremely distracting for me. And most people ask that I actually turn them off because of how bad they can be. So the Miami find. So the one from 2,000 years ago is a find that they've known about for 25 years. But the lower portion of what I was showing you is for the past year and a half. So this find starts, or the dig starts in 2021, 2021. Um, and currently they're trying to keep it under wraps. They're not really talking about it. The DNA differences here in Turtle Island. Absolutely. So the DNA differences here in Turtle Island, there's a few, like there's a unique mitochondrial DNA found here in Turtle Island that's not found anywhere else. Um, well, let me take that back. X1 is found here. Its daughter mitochondrial DNA, X2, is found in Siberia, but it came from the X1 DNA that we find here in Turtle Island, which means the X2 DNA that we see in Siberia is a backward migration of that X DNA here in Turtle Island, something else they're recently discovering. The ghost species. Ghost species are something that we're actually seeing a lot more in the news lately, but we have about, let me count, 6 ghost species, 5 of which we see in turtle or in human DNA, Homo sapien DNA, 1 which we see in Neanderthal and Denisovian DNA. Ghost species are species that we see a fingerprint of them in DNA, like ours are Neanderthals and Denisovians, but we haven't found the species in the fossil record. Or if we have found the species in the fossil record, we haven't been able to get DNA out of that species. Like Nalati, we'll probably never get DNA out of Nalati, but Nalati could be one of the ghost species from African population. That would absolutely be really spot on for every other thought process. With Nalati, it might actually be how we spark forward. Like, so we don't know, but we see 3 ghost species in the 2 spaces in Africa that do not have Neanderthal DNA, because everywhere else but these 2 spaces have Neanderthal DNA. The Oyo population of West Africa, and the Kwe population of South Africa. And we see that they have three ghost species in them. Australians, Indigenous Australians, have 1 ghost species, and Turtle Island Indigenous people have 1 ghost species. And again, we have evidence in Turtle Island 130,000 years ago with the Ceruti Mastodon find of Homo erectus having made it over here and speciating. We have evidence in the Moy Hill site in Australia at 120,000 years ago, which would be the same thing of erectus making it there and speciating. So if it gets bad, I don't know how many moderators we have in here. I think we might only have 1 or 2. If it gets bad, I will go ahead and turn them back off again. I know that we've got them on for a moment just because I knew that there were some questions on them. Evolution is true. Evolution doesn't disprove creation stories, though. Evolution actually proves creation stories when you listen to creation stories and actually listen to the creation stories. Even the creation story in the Bible teaches that God was a God among gods, and that there were other human beings, and that God chose Adam and Eve and made them from the earth, and then their children married other beings that were there already on the planet, right? So even that doesn't disprove evolution. It just shows that there are different stories that we've told ourselves to explain how we came to be, right? And with the biblical story, the Judaic people in the Torah, right, are a chosen people of a specific God, right? It never negates that there are other gods or other people, right? It states that they are chosen, they are Yahweh's chosen, right? And so it doesn't disprove that any more than it disproves any other creation story that I personally have heard. Every creation story that I have heard, you can see the reality of it in evolution when you listen to the actual creation story, which almost always includes the fact that there are other species, right? Which would be Neanderthals or Denisovians or Nalati, and almost always includes the idea that we came from the earth, right? Which is absolutely what evolution is, right? Evolution is absolutely being created by the biome to sustain the biome, right? That's what evolution is. All of us are created, the animals, everything is created to sustain the biome, right? And the biome is created, each piece of the biome is created to sustain the biome, and we are a piece of the biome, right? So it's created to sustain each other, right? And so All evolution stories that talk about being created from the earth or being created out of the earth, that's absolutely true, right? It's absolutely proved in evolution, right? No, there's not scientific evidence of a worldwide flood, but what there is absolute scientific evidence of is earth cycles causing meltings and risings of water along coastlines that goes global. And it doesn't mean that the whole world has flooded. What it means is that the coastlines where most people live, most cities are, because they have a lot of food availability, right? You know, you've got not only the sea line for all of your food there, but you usually have some form of a forest or some form of a plain or something else that has a lot of food ability there, right? The coastlines are changing, right? And if all of your cities are built on the coastlines across the globe, which we have scientifically proven, then that absolutely is a worldwide flood as far as you know, as far as your stories are telling, because everyone in the world is affected by it. If you're not on the coastline, you have to move in. And so the people interior are affected by it. Landing on the mountain in Noah's Ark because the mountain is above the water, right? Like, so we see them. So hold on just a second. I am going to turn this back over to sub only chat so that I can read through some of these questions because there are a lot of questions here. And also to kind of calm it down a bit because it can get hard for everybody. I will turn these back on. I'm not discussing Neanderthals yet. And I'm not discussing toxic gender roles yet. I will discuss science and medicine being indigenous because we are currently talking about the city in Miami that was found that is older and predates and is a continuously occupied space by the Miami people for 7,000 years until they were invaded by Europeans. So let me go through some of these questions because I think there were some that were pretty important in here. Okay. That's when I opened. Okay, so again, the Miami find, if you're just coming in, is a 7,000-year-old find that so they had a find that is 25 years they've been working on this find that's about 2,000 years old that shows a continuous occupation. And like, I think there's a monument involved. There's like this huge, like it's a city, like it's important, right? At 2,000 years old, which is roughly like Rome, right? Okay, and then what we see is and that's a 25-year-old find. What we start 25 years of working and excavating that find. Let me pull this up again really quick so that you can see what I'm talking about. It's the one here on the top. So up here on the top, we see this circle with the line coming out of it. And this circle with the line coming out of it is 2,000 years old. Okay, this is a find that they've been working on. It's currently a monument. And there is huge significance within it. I haven't read the article on that one because I didn't know about it. It's the other one that I knew about or am just finding out about. So this one on the bottom that looks like, because it is a construction site, is the new site. And what happened and happens with all construction sites, is they have an archaeologist, it's called a CRM, who goes in and they do a test of the site. We really should be doing LiDAR. Hopefully we'll get there soon. And I think this article actually said this is one of those reasons we should be doing LiDAR. But they did a test of it. And in the test, they started finding a civilization. And they have been working on this for the last year and a half. And what they have found is that this civilization is 7,000 years old and that it is a continuously occupied space for 7,000 years that includes extensive structures, extensive tools, extensive use of plant matter and animal matter to create tools. It is an extensive civilization for 7,000 years of continuous occupation. Everything is as usual on my nwiddaord.com site. It's under the This Week. So the link that I got from this is from the Miami Herald. I don't know who the my you know I'm not sure how trustworthy the Miami Herald is. The archaeologists in this site all seem to be pretty trustworthy, so the words that they're saying I'm down for. But I haven't done a whole lot of further research on it because it is a new thing that I've come across. There's not going to be any papers written on this, and the reason that there's not going to be any papers written on this, yes, it's a year and a half old, right? They've only been they're still finding stuff, they're still pulling stuff up, right? So they haven't documented a lot of it, and they're kind of trying to keep it under wraps because, again, we have this white supremacy thought process within our culture that does that, that states that anything that proves that indigenous people were advanced proves Western thought being unadvanced or not special, right? And anytime they come across something that says that any other group other than Western thought might have been advanced, they have to prove that it didn't happen, or hide it because of the fact that again removes that ability to be special. There, where that egotism of society comes in, that wants to be, the god that exists in immortality, right? That immortality, that need to, and again, this is that difference in culture, right? This is where you have so many cultures that the impact that they're leaving is not as great because they don't have that need to be immortal. There's no need to be immortal. They realize they're a part of the biome. They're not trying to leave a major impact. That's the find, again, just for those coming in recently. Anything else that I hear that or see that I didn't, that doesn't cover underneath that, I'll go ahead and go over that as well. Hey, Tara. So I do have, on my widdaord.com site, under bibliographies is information on Neanderthals, that will give you more information on finds, or on different things with Neanderthals. You have to piece together a bunch of different things with Neanderthals to figure out anything. You have to take a broader view on it to get to a point that you can. How come there aren't multiple species of humans today? Because the other species of humans, they were around longer than we've been around for the most part, um, and they hit the end of their cycle as a species, right? With Neanderthals, we kind of enveloped them. Pretty sure that whatever species was here and whatever species was in Australia was enveloped, because they were probably quite small by that point as a species dynamic, because their genetics would be quite small, and narrow, and that would create this narrowing of genetic diversity. Because of a small founding population, creates less children. You have less children, it creates infertility, right? So your populations get narrower and narrower. So this to me is why we don't have multiple species. But it's also important that all of those species, like Denisovian, we now believe comes around in about 400,000 years ago, and they leave us 13,000 years ago, right? Neanderthal is 600,000 years, so they were 300,000 years by the time we came on the scene 300,000 years ago. We're only here for 300,000 years. Some species we know, like our current knowledge of Lonzonensis, Lonzonensis is, a very narrow time range, but that's because we only have a very narrow example of the species so far. Same thing with Longi, same thing with Nalati, same thing. Well, Florensis, we think might be alive. There's a PhD who's down there studying it right now, like an anthropologist who's been studying Florensis his whole career, who is down there and was told, yeah, we've seen them recently. And so he's like, oh, well, let's see if they're still alive. So, um, all of these species were here long before we came onto the scene. And so those that are gone, are really gone because they kind of left. And most of them aren't really gone because most of them are kind of living on in us. What did we start off as? So we started off as an amoeba, like every other thing on this planet. um, by the time we get to us, like our start as a species, what we evolved from. Hold on just 5 seconds. It's going to pause me for just a second. Sorry, YouTube. I know my palm's in your way. And I know that you're not really seeing what I'm pulling up. I'm pulling up a picture of Java Man that I have because I figure that's a pretty one that I like. This is who we evolved from. As you can see, this looks like us. This is very much us, right? This is a Kinnis and Kinnis image. Kinnis and Kinnis is a great reconstructor of ancient hominins. And this image is of, I believe, Java Man. And it's beautiful. It's one of my favorites. And I know that it's also one of the favorites of a couple of my friends in here. And so that's why I use this one. To me, and why I love this image is you can see, hello, Subtle, you can see the beauty. You can see the spark of creation, of curiosity, of need to know, that is what drives us in this human that created us. And they are a human because they are Homo species, and all Homo species are humans. This is the human that created us. This is where we come from. This is our grandfather. Isn't this a beautiful being to descend from? Right? Isn't this a gorgeous, beautiful curiosity? They created the ability to control fire, right? And not only did they create the ability to control fire, but they created our first uses of clothing. And they're the first species to make it across the globe. And they actually crossed water, right? They had an ability to cross water in some way, open sea in some way, right? And to speciate into all the other species that came, including us. They are such a magnificent species. This is really a species I have a lot of love for, right? This is who we descend from. This is who we come from. This is who we start off as, right? And then we get some addition from some cousins. But this is us. This is where we come from. So the idea that we start from apes is a misnomer. We have a last common ancestor with apes. Just like we have a last common ancestor with horses and tigers and trees and fish. We all have a last common ancestor, right? We're all created for this biome. We all develop together to create and fund and hold and provide for this biome. This is going to pause me. Well, actually, probably shouldn't pause me in this switch back. The conversation of how science proves the biblical origin story correct is really the farthest I wanted to go with that conversation, just stating, like, I have no truck with Christianity or desire to. Planet flip. What about the planet flip after the pole shift? I don't know. I don't know enough about geology, geography, Earth. I do know that that theory has been a conspiracy theory thought process that has been something that people who study conspiracy theories or who get deep into it have been following. And my mother literally moved us because the coast was going to fall into the ocean because of the polar shift. And the only place that was going to be safe was Northeast Washington. And it's been supposed to happen for a couple hundred years. It ain't happened yet. Like, I don't know. Right. Um, if it happens, we will either recover from it or not recover from it. But I'm way more worried about the fact of whether or not we will have oxygen, because we're creating a lack of oxygen for ourselves because we're greedy, right? So I'm not so worried about the shift of the poles or things that we're not sure are going to happen as I am about the things that scientists prove is happening right fucking now and is urgent, right? I can't really talk about the role of children in Neanderthal society. We don't have a lot of evidence of the role of children in Neanderthal society. The role of children in early hominin societies is, the continuation. You're not going to see that there's going to be a lot of children. There's usually only going to be, and we see this even current societies who live in a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, right? Like, which is actually a healthier and less work, like less taxing on the body than the lifestyle that we currently live in, the civilization. But people living in those in current hunter-gatherer societies tend to space their children out because they have the means and the ability to space their children out. There are different techniques that you can use that we have lack of knowledge of because it's been removed from us, that can actually help you space out your childbearing And there's proof that we've known of those different techniques for shit the Neanderthals knew of different herbal techniques. And our knowledge would show that there is an understanding that you don't want 5 toddlers that you have to keep safe at the same time when you don't have walls, right? So you're going to ensure that you have a child now, and then 5 years from now when you have somebody who can help you, who is not going to be uh, a death wish, like, is not going to actually get you all killed, right? So you space them out. And I think that other than that, I mean, they're loved and valued members of community, just like every other community member is a loved and valued member, because we need all members of community to move us forward as a community until we got to the point where we're here, right? We've always needed community, and we've always needed all the members of a community to move us forward. And all members of community have been valuable in the fact that it takes all of those genetics to get us to the next generation. Somebody's got to be breeding with somebody else, right? Somebody has to be creating babies with somebody else somewhere along the lines, right? So the more genetics you have and the more diversity you have and all of those things, we're always really cherished and needed until we get to this point where we've decided to other everybody to the point that we allow people to starve in the streets even when they are children. So, how can I claim science is indigenous? Yes, perfect. Science and medicine. And how I can claim both science and medicine are indigenous is the fact that they are within indigenous societies for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. When so we have a find that's 31,000 years old, from Borneo, that is a perfect amputation. As into the point, we don't do them that well this day and age, of a lower limb, right? We know medically from the tells on the bone that it happened 6 to 9 years before this genetically female person died. And this genetically female person died at 19 or 20. So we believe early to mid teens, and that they used an obsidian blade because obsidian today is the only material that can be sharpened fine enough to cut between cellular structures, like between cells. And so they used an obsidian blade on this lower limb. And we know that they had to have enough understanding of pain killers, anesthetics, to be able to anesthesize this person to perform a surgery on this person of the lower limb, because we know that without some form of anesthesia, that lower limb amputations will kill a person. That you must either be unconscious when it is performed, like have freaked out enough to fall out of consciousness, which is why how the only successful ones during the Civil War without using morphine were performed. Any surgery of a lower limb performed without some form of anesthesia or an unconscious person in some form or another, the body goes into shock at the knowledge of what losing the lower limb does to the body, because losing the lower limb means you have to walk again. You have to learn to walk. You have to learn everything again, right? And so the body will go into shock. And so they know that they had to have some form of anesthetic. They also know that they had to have some form of antiseptic because there's no sign of infection in the bone. And the person lived for another 9 years. We also know that they had to have had enough knowledge of the structure of the lower body to be able uh, to cut the blood vessels, and be able to find them and then cauterize them. You would tie them off in this time period, you're more likely to cauterize them. And enough knowledge to make sure that there was flesh extending past the end of the bone and ability to cover that flesh, because without that, you get infection. So they had to have enough knowledge of anatomy to do all of these things 31,000 years ago successfully in a cut that is more pristine than most cuts today, right? So that is not even our first evidence of medicine. Our first evidence of medicine is in Neanderthal. We see amputation within Neanderthal of a right forelimb, might be left, of a forelimb in Neanderthal. We also see evidence of herbology in Neanderthal. There are certain herbs that we see in the dentition of their teeth that have no caloric value and they have no taste value. And like they're extremely bitter. And so we believe that this shows that these herbs were understood We also see that these herbs are usually in association with significant medical issues that we see these herbs work for. So we see science and medicine in Neanderthals. We see science and medicine in Borneo, but we also see science in Homo erectus. And this is what I was stating about Homo erectus. The foundation of every science that you have comes from Homo erectus. Your brain is because Homo erectus had science. Because science is, I observe something in nature, I have a prediction of what that observation means. I I'm trying to make sure I don't have my little graph thing. I test the prediction, and then if the testing hypothesis, I skipped. I have a thought process, and then I have my prediction. I hypothesize what that means. I test it, right? And if the testing proves wrong, then it goes back to the hypothesis phase, which is also the observation prediction phase, right? And if the testing proves right, then it becomes a theory, it becomes a fact, right? It becomes known, right? And I continuously test it. And if that testing ever fails, it's no longer a theory, right? So to get to the use of fire, you have to use early scientific method. I observe in nature that fire cooks meat, fire warms, fire keeps animals at bay. I'm not sure why I've observed in nature that I need to control fire, but I have decided that I need to control fire. How do I decide to control fire? How do I figure out what I need to do to control fire? I observe, I hypothesize, I test. So you can control fire in a couple of different ways. You can control fire by making a spark by knocking flint against pyrite or different stones, right? And you can absolutely see where this would happen as somebody is creating flint knap tools. Maybe a spark catches on some tinder that's on the ground, right? And it creates a fire. And oh, wow, that's a way to create fire, right? And so now I have this idea that maybe I can replicate that. Every time I try and replicate it, it's testing, right? Maybe instead I start with a coal that I've gotten off of a tree that's been hit by lightning. And now I have to keep this coal alive. So I have to understand how to keep this coal alive. And in understanding how to keep this coal alive, I go through different testing phases. First, I need to learn how to feed it. What keeps it alive? Now I need to learn how to store it and make sure that I can use it to travel from place to place. These are all scientific methods. These are all science. Now, once Homo erectus gets the ability to control fire, Homo erectus gets the ability to regularly cook their food. Regularly cooking your food gives pre-digestion, and pre-digestion gives a greater caloric intake from a smaller amount of food. And when you have a greater amount of caloric intake from a smaller amount of food, what you see is that greater caloric intake in neonates and small children who are developing their brains goes directly to the brain. So Homo erectus scientifically created your brain. It is Homo erectus's use of science to control fire, to feed their infants, that gives their infants larger brains. Why Neanderthal and Homo sapiens and Denisovians have larger brains, and why Naladi, who does not have a smaller brain, who is probably a descendant of Homo erectus, has the brain shape that we don't see until 30,000 to 40,000 years ago in Homo sapiens, that we think is why we are the intelligent that we are, and shows in Naladi's use of burial at a time where nobody else buried. But it's definitely the brain shape that they would have gotten from Homo erectus, right? Because later we get it from Homo erectus, unless Naladi is a species that helped create us, maybe, right? So it is within that we see that not only science is indigenous and medicine is indigenous, but they're not just indigenous to Turtle Island, they're indigenous across the globe. They are what we had before. How did we lose them? See, we also know like the Egyptians did brain surgery and plastic surgery and full knee and hip replacements that we wish we could do today, like beautiful knee and hip replacements, right? I was a radiographer and have been in surgeries before I was an archaeologist, right? Including hip replacement surgeries. So we see that ancient Egypt had medicine, ancient Greece has medicine, ancient Rome has medicine. All of these things have medicine until 400. And Constantine makes Christianity a state religion, and Christianity needs for you to not question God. And science questions God. And medicine turns you into God and the decision of who lives and dies out of God's hand. And so science and medicine are literally eradicated in any space controlled by Christianity as a state religion from 400 to 1600. So that's why science and medicine are indigenous. And it is only Christianity stamping them out that hid that knowledge from you and hides that knowledge from you today. And it is the influx of indigenous people in science and medicine that is creating a better understanding in science and medicine and moving us forward currently within science and medicine. Just saying. Hi, Kim. There won't be more of us. Hi, Sleepy. There won't be more of us speciations because we don't isolate. Plus, we have no need to really adapt anymore because we adapt our surroundings so much that we're not going to adapt our tones. It takes about 100 generations for different skin tones to adapt or different eye adaptations or nose. Like bodily adaptations to environment take 100 generations, 2,500 years. To get to a speciation point takes an isolation, excuse me, of about I think it's about 100,000 years, right? It takes a lot of that. And you have to be fully isolated. You can't have that mix back in. It's that mix back in that we're never going to not have, right? If 100,000 years from now we're still alive and the Sentinelese haven't left their island, maybe there'll be a new species and we'll be a different species. Though, really, the only way I think that will change, I mean, we're always evolving, but, like, we've all got to evolve really in the same ways at this point because it's planetary at this point. Like, because we're not needing to evolve specific for specific regions as much anymore because we've been able to control those things. We might evolve different ways of breathing as we erase oxygen. But hey, Sabu. Okay, so okay, absolutely subtle. If we go to other planets, we might. Oh, I missed your question, subtle. Can you ask it again? I didn't see it in the thing unless I already answered it without realizing it was you, but I didn't notice one. And again, I'm out of here around 1 today because I have to go and get an iron infusion. That's why I went an hour earlier today than I had planned. I don't get to set the iron infusion timelines. But what we'll do after I figure out what that question is, we'll go ahead and move on into Neanderthals for a little bit. I'm not sure if children were purposed in rearing the younger as much as we tend to think. I think on some levels, but not on all the levels. So, we've talked about having the elders usually sitting around the fire, keeping and tending a home, right? Keeping and tending the space that everybody's living in, making sure that everything stays in space. I think that you can depend on, I think you can depend on a 5-year-old to watch a toddler a little bit. But if you've ever raised a 5-year-old and a toddler, you know that it's only a little bit because they might kill them unintentionally. Like, so there's only so much dependence on small children or on children to raise the younger generation. Once you get up around preteen or pre-adolescence, you might see that you're getting more of involvement in your younger groups and in your spacing out, and that might be a way or a reason to space out. But I would say that you're absolutely going to see that children are absolutely performing part of the work, right? So, like, say we have a group of roughly 10 people, 7 of us are adult, and we have 3 children. And there's 3 children, there's an infant, and there is a 7-year-old, and there is a 15-year-old. Or let's do it a little bit younger. There's an infant, there's a 5-year old, and there's an 11-year-old. We have an elder or two within the group. So the elder is going to stay home with the infant. I and a buddy are going to go out and we're going to do some harvesting down by the river. And we're going to take the 5-year-old with us. And then a band of about 3 other people are going to go out and they're going to do some hunting. And they're going to take that 11-year-old with them. So they're learning what's going on and how to do things, but they're under constant adult supervision. They're not being left alone to care for each other, for a couple of reasons. One is that they're not learning how to be productive members of society at that point, right? They're not learning how to gather or hunt or to, how to cure a hide or, get water. And the other thing is that, let's be real. I mean, even if it's, I fell asleep when my daughter was 4.5, 5. She had to be 5. I fell asleep. She was 5 years old. And I had this, we were living in Louisiana on the edge of base. And I thought, she's old enough that if I take a nap for 2 hours, it's not going to harm nothing. She's inside, the doors are all locked. She can't get out. She's not going to go out. She knows better than that. Everything's going to be fine. I took a nap and I woke up and all of my floors were tile. And she took the specific shampoo that I could only get in Washington and washed my entire floors with it. Right? There's things that kids get into, even if it's harmless, unsupervised in a safe environment where they're not going to die. Right? So you're definitely not going to leave them because they just can't process it. It's not a fault. It's not it's literally the stage. Like they're supposed to use that stage to learn how to take care of themselves and to learn how to take care of the environment around them. We're supposed to use those stages to learn how to hunt and to learn how to, use herbs or whatever else it is that is our interest, that attracts us, which draws us, right? And it's also that time when we learn what draws us and attracts us and what part that we're going to play in our community, right? What talents that we have, what things are the important benefits that we bring to the community. And it's never child rearing. Like child rearing is absolutely an important benefit to the community, but child rearing is very few people's main goals until we get to this Western thought process that believes that a mother's main goal in life is to, let me rephrase that anybody with a womb has a main goal of not only bearing, but raising children and should put their entire life work into raising children first. And it's not until we get to that thought process that we think of that as something that anybody needs to, learn how to do, and therefore might need to the time as a child to learn how to do. And B is the sole purpose for anybody, right? Because even the grandmother who is at home tending the fire as everybody else is out hunting because we've got a newborn, even the grandmother at home is still, she's tending the fire. She's probably also doing some small work, whether it's making clothing or making tools, depending on what it is that her specific talents are, right? Or the grandfather at home, whoever's there, depending on what their specific talents are, they're utilizing their specific talents. Like, so if you're in a hunter-gatherer society, you don't just do one thing. There's no jack of all trades versus master of one, right? There's no ability to master one, right? You not only have to feed yourself, you have to be able to do all the things that feed yourself gets, right? And you have to be able to provide the whole thing. And if you've got 10 people, nobody gets a chance to specialize in flint napping only, right? Nobody gets a chance to specialize in just this. Your flint nappers are napping flint so they can go out and hunt, right? The people who are making the clothing are also probably out hunting, or maybe they're gathering, right? So there's no specialization even, right? So you all have small work things that you do and large work things that you do, things that you have to do outside of the home to provide and things that you have to do inside of the home to provide. And so when you have things that you have to do outside the home and things you have to do inside of the home, when you can no longer do the things outside of the home, you continue to do the things inside the home. So whereas an elder might not be as able to go out and hunt and gather, they're probably still doing their flint napping or their clothing making or their other tool making, because I mean baskets and bags and bowls and plates and different things to eat off of, just different tool makings, right? So what you're seeing is as they're taking care of an infant, as they're ensuring that infant doesn't die, they're also still providing That's not their main provision, right? Um, so I think that the role of children within society in earlier societies, and I think that this is really supported within most societies, right? Is a play, right? The ability to play gives us community with nature, and play also gives us understanding of nature and each other, and play also gives us understanding of how to do things, right? So we have that primary need for children to have that play that teaches them, but they also have that primary need in these earlier communities to also, know what their part is going to be in that earlier community, work that part out, and start learning the tools that they're going to use for the rest of their life to be the member of community that sparks for them, right? It's not, I had a daughter, so I think that she's going to be a weaver. It's, I had a baby, and they're going to decide what sings to them as I raise them. They're going to have different things that they're drawn to. They might go out gathering with me when they're younger and it's safe, though it's not any safer than hunting, really. Um, and then hunting when they're older, but whichever one that they're drawn to is going to be what they primarily do. Or maybe they primarily do neither and they switch up day to day. Whether or not they decide to nap tools or to carve tools is going to be a decision that is made by them as they grow, and different things sing to them and speak to them, because each of these things are valuable and each of these things are needed, right? So there's no need to conform you into one, because none is need more than the other. There's no greater value in hunting than there is in gathering, right? So with Neanderthals, they're trying to decide whether or not Neanderthals had specific enzymes, because it looks like certain Neanderthal groups were more carnivorous than other groups. In fact, more carnivorous than obligatory carnivores, right? And we're not obligatory carnivores, right? And Neanderthal were not obligatory carnivores. And because of that, they think that there's a possibility that Neanderthals had a different, like zinc or something, because if you get more than 35 to 40% of your protein, or of your diet, of your caloric intake from animals, it will actually, except for specific groups who have developed to be able to do that, because there are, it will actually poison you. It's called protein poisoning, right? So hunting is important, right? But you can absolutely go longer without animal protein than you can go without eating, right? So you can be eating roots and vegetables and fruits all week long, and get 6 ounces from a kill, right? And you're okay. We eat way too much meat. We really do. And I love meat, and I'm not telling you to stop eating meat. And vegetarianism is unhealthy and unsustainable for our environment. But I think that we also eat too much meat, right? Not but. And I also think we eat too much meat, right? We have too much meat in our diet, not because we have too much food in our diet, right? Because our portions specifically are too much, and because we actually eat an extremely meat heavy diet, or if as long as we're eating a meat heavy diet. And because when you're looking at things like restaurants and stuff like that, it's always we have this idea that we should have meat 3 times a day, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't have wheat or grains 3 times a day either, right? Like, we shouldn't be having any of these things massively. We should not be singulature about our diets. Mono diets are not healthy for anybody. But when we're looking at that, what we're looking at is the fact that it all really ties in. When you're looking at, one second, sorry. When you're looking at how people are living, we have to understand that pretty much nothing that we're doing today is how people are living back then. Not necessarily in a positive way, right? Nobody is living just 1 or 2 people in a home. Nobody, ever. That's not enough people to provide for yourself. If it's just you, you can't provide for yourself. You can't provide safety for yourself. Nobody is living 1 or 2 people in a home. Nobody is, in spaces where They don't see other people for extended period of times. Nobody's in spaces where it matters what other people look like. You're all fucking human, even if you're another human species, right? Like Neanderthals or Denisovians. Um, and we also see that there's no need to mold anybody. And because there's no need to mold anybody to follow a specific way or a specific path, you are choosing who you are as you enter into community. And so the things that sing to you are what you get. So as a child, you're really learning all of the community. What day is it? What do you feel like today? What do you want to do today? What attracts you today? Well, you might be a little bit too young to do that one, but we could do this one instead, right? That's similar. What attracts you? What should we do today, right? Because you're teaching them how to provide for themselves more than you're teaching them how to provide for young. I'm going to go ahead and turn on comments for a couple of minutes. The Neanderthals for foodies is a really interesting one. This is something we've been looking at a lot lately. We've discovered things like flatbread and things like leftovers that were used to make new food. This latest one that was really cool that I put up on the website is actually they discovered that Neanderthals cooked crab. They would go hunting brown crab and they would bring it back in this specific site. Where was the site? Now I have to see what the site was. Lisbon. Portugal. So Lisbon. So they're looking at they're harvesting brown crabs from this tidal pools in Lisbon, and they're yielding about 20 grams of meat for each crab that they're finding. They're showing extensive butchery on the shells, and they're also showing burn on the shells, so it shows that they've actually been cooked. And the average carapace width, so the average back of the animal is 16 centimeters, which is pretty good size. So what we're looking at is just another example of how Neanderthals are really this extensive group of beings that is very much just like early humans, early sapiens is very much like us, is very much seeking comfort and safety and community, right? Is very much doing everything it can within an environment in a world that oftentimes is actually safer than our environment and world today. And in doing everything that they can is doing it quite fucking well, right? Like, again, like I was saying earlier, we see medicine within Neanderthals, we see clothing and fire and all of that sort of stuff as far back as Erectus. And so we definitely see it within Neanderthals. Besides other evidence, other than that, absolutely. I mean, they come from Erectus, wouldn't they? But we definitely see a lot of evidence of all of these different knowledges and advancements. And as I was pointing out when we were doing the lives on Neanderthals and cave paintings, when this is somewhere you've lived for 300 years as a group, this is a safe and stable environment. It's a more safe and stable environment than you will ever understand. Nowhere on the globe currently have people been able to live in the same safe and stable environment as a family for 300 years. Nowhere. And many of these prehistoric caves that we have are prehistoric settlements, or even this prehistoric, it means anything written history. Okay, so even these prehistoric caves here, or findings here in Turtle Island, all of these things are showing continuous occupation of a specific area over hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? All of our caves, the cave in Denisovia shows continuous occupation for several hundred years of several different species of human, right? So I'm not even sure, but we absolutely have to understand that the groups of people that we're looking at before us are just as sophisticated as we are. They're just as advanced as we are. We look at advancement in a different way, though. They did not look at advancement as a need to devour everything they possibly could, and they did not look at advancement as a need to um, leave an indelible mark forever, right? They didn't look at his advancement even today. You know, we got some guy out there that is currently spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month into turning himself into an 18-year-old, right? Like he's in his 50s or something. Like, I mean, nobody had the need to do that. Nobody had the need to live forever. Nobody had the need of immortality. This need of immortality is so new for us. So so harmful, harmful for us, right? This need for immortality, this need to be known forever, this need to leave an indelible mark in history or in stone or in the world, right? We have chat. Well, and I'm not saying that we don't have cool advancements. I love my phone. I'll be real. I love the internet. I love access to everything, right? Um, I know that there are things that I have to try and find paywalls around or, things like that. I know that there's always shit that's always cock blocking, but I love that access to everything that we get these days, right? But all of this stuff comes from Erectus using fire. None of this would have happened if Erectus hadn't developed the use of fire and the use of clothes and the ability to cross water. None of it would have happened without that, right? So these are really fabulous tools. But just like 20 years ago, we didn't feel the lack of a cell phone. They didn't feel a lack of a cell phone either, right? Just like 20 years ago, just like 30 years ago, the idea of having a computer in your home was really weird and rich, right? Most people didn't, right? Um, just like 50 years ago, nobody knew what the fuck a computer was. Just like 100 years ago, nobody knew what a television was, right? When you don't know it exists, you don't feel the lack of its existence. So what you're left with is joy and community and safety in a cave you've lived in 300 years as your family and your band and your group that is beautifully arted, right? Getting to sit around. But is it ignorance? That's it. Is it ignorance? I think that we're ignorant. I don't find that ignorance. Living in concert and harmony with the world around you, is that ignorant? Would that not, in fact, be more intelligent? Currently, our non ignorant choices are killing us, right? Currently, our non ignorant choices will leave us as the only species ever that caused its own mass extinction, right? So if that's what we're looking at, then are they ignorant or are we ignorant? Is it not greatly ignorant to think that you are a step above the rest of the globe, the rest of the beings on this planet? I would say it's absolutely way more in tune, yes. Average life expectancy of which we are, so we have like 18 finds of Neanderthals. We're currently developing a few more from the bones that we have in Denisovian caves as we're dating them, but we don't have a whole lot of any of their bones. So any average life expectancy that we have is not going to be very feasible, right? We do know that our oldest finds are, I think the oldest is 50 to 60. So we do know that they could live, and both of those oldest finds actually have extensive damage to their bodies over the years. Both of them are crippled and needed extensive care. And so we would absolutely see that, and by that I mean specifically, both of them have a lack of lower limb use when I say crippled. And I think that terminology is probably outdated. So I would say disabled, but disabled is quite a broad range of things. So I want to say specifically issues walking, which means that they both specifically needed care. They also had specific issues. One was fully, I think they think that he was fully deaf and partially blind, and that's Krebs. That's Shanidar 1. And then one is has no teeth, right? So all of them needed extensive help. Yeah, well, and I think that we're kind of I think when I said the word, it feels to me like that's something we're moving away from using, and I want to make sure that I'm not using something that can be seen as triggering or offensive. We were just talking about Neanderthals, Red Road. And we were talking about our examples of our oldest Neanderthals, as in not timeline, but as in age wise. I'm sorry, without what snarky commentary, and I'm not telling a story. And what was snarky commentary? Hey, Alan. No, you're fine. You're fine. I did. Okay, so let me go back over it because I actually see that there's a couple of people for whom that this is going to be important for anyways. And it is really my main topic today, though the Neanderthal topic is always fun, but it really is the main topic. So recently, there's an article, and this is on my this week's page on my website. Came out with the Miami Herald. They are trying to keep this under wraps. Um, but there is a find from 2,000 years ago that they've been working on for about 25 years. That is uh, literally a hop, skip, and a jump from like literally. I'll put the picture. I don't know if you're over in the in TikTok, but if you saw that, then you probably did. So let me pull this up. So the top of this is that circle with the tail off of it is the first vine, and that's 2,000 years old, and they've been working on it for about 25 years. It looks to be an extensive civilization with there's something in it that's monumental, and I'm not sure what it is because I haven't actually read on that one. But the construction site at the bottom, the CRM is the I want to say content resource manager, but that's not it. But it's a profession in archaeology. It's one of the main professions in archaeology in the U.S. currently, where you go out to construction sites or government sites and you do a test dig, and that test dig will tell us if there's uh, ancestors in that space, right? And so in the test dig, they found something, so that's why it looks like a why, darling? That's why it looks like a construction site because it was. And then they started digging, and what they are finding is that there is a civilization in Miami that is 7,000 years of continuously occupying that city space. So in this city space here, the uh, the lower space, we're seeing evidence of 7,000 years of continuous occupation, including extensive structures and including extensive use of different uh, plant and animal matter to make tools. And so we're seeing um, this is older than Mesopotamia. This is older than This is older than really any other civilization. The only other space that I know of, or the only other city that I know of that um, predates this is the Engazal that we've talked about before, which is about 9,000 years ago. So it only predates it by about 2,000 years. And it's not a continuous occupied space, whereas this is a continuous for 7,000 years occupied space, which means that from 7,000 years ago to when Europeans landed on the Miami people, we're seeing continuous occupation in the space. An extensive civilization was there. Um, and that's what it is. The article on it, Alan, is on my website under the This Week for a little bit more in depth. Old Egypt isn't older than that, though. So Old Egypt, ancient Egypt. So I think Scorpion is so Scorpion, King Scorpion is literally our oldest evidence of a king in Egypt, and it is our oldest evidence of a hieroglyph. We see this written on a rock wall that or rock face in a pass, and it's a scorpion with a our earliest evidence of a cartouche, right? Because a cartouche is the framework around the symbols and it makes it into a name and specifically into a king's name, right? And so our earliest evidence of hieroglyphs is, and I want to say that it's 5,000 years ago, but I, I, I want to say not 5,000 years. I want to say that it's 4,000 BCE, but I can't remember if it's 4,000 BCE or older. So let me take a look really quick at what the pre-dynastic timeline is. Because, okay, so 3,000 BCE. So, and they're saying that Scorpion is in 3,000 BCE, but I know that there's some evidence of like, there's graves, but not cities before that. There's like evidence in Egypt of cemeteries, but not of cities before that. So it's going to be a little bit different, right? And again, it even predates what's going on in even the earliest Egyptian or Kemet dynasties, right? Why would you have to pay for anything? If it were all true, it'd be a headline. This is a headline. There's an article, right? I've stated a couple times, the article is on my website. It's absolutely a headline that there has been a city found in Miami that predates absolutely is a headline. Again, widdaord.com is the website. Here, let me put this up so you can see that again, right? Widdaord.com is the website. And it's absolutely a headline. And actually, the headline is, let me read this headline to you because I actually really liked this headline. Let me see if this is the right article, right? A major archaeological discovery was made on the Miami River. Why was it kept under wraps? There's your headline. It's a headline, right? I'm sure there is, but I mean, they can search out their own articles. This is just the one that I found that I put up, and I didn't go into a lot of research on it because I don't want to. I haven't had time to go into a lot of research on it. The article is from the 8th. Like it's this morning's or last night's. It was last night's actually. This says it must have been updated today, but I saw it come across last night. Is predates Mesopotamia. Is the city that predates Mesopotamia in the Mesopotamian area. It's the earliest city in Mesopotamia. You know, I have some ancestry that's Judaic, but I personally am not Judaic. No. Oh, Raymond, we're not dealing with that line of thought in here. I have debunked that line of thought a whole bunch of times. It's really rude. It's erasing both my Sudanese ancestresses' travel on the Middle Passage, and it's also erasing what my Indigenous to Turtle Island ancestresses went through when Europeans got here. But we're not spending any time on that stupidity today. Please take it and your white supremacist rhetoric elsewhere. Turtle Island Indigenous people are Turtle Island Indigenous people, and to state that they don't exist is horrific of you. And why would you participate in white supremacist genocide? That's it. That's all. So rude. Yeah, it was really rude. You were actually, I mean, that was actually really rude for them to state that, right? Absolutely rude for them to state that. Turtle Island is one of the words used for North America by, well, it's an English translation of a phrase used for North America by Indigenous nations along the Eastern Seaboard. Misfit, I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm talking about 7,000 years. This is a 7,000-year-old continuous occupation in Miami. Okay, so gender. And I've only got half an hour left. We've pretty much gone over everything else. So let's get into that one. But we're going to go ahead and turn it off. California artist. That's the Cerruti Mastodon find. It's fucking brilliant. I've done some stuff on the Cerruti Mastodon find. It shows that Homo erectus makes it to Turtle Island, that Turtle Island indigenous stories are actually correct, and that the ghost species within Turtle Island indigenous people are probably that species. Misfit, where are you reading the article that I have pulled it up from? Or are you looking at a different article? A lot of things will do different, like dating, depending on the two. You'll see that some spaces will. You're still welcome, and I'll turn it back on. It just makes it easier for me and everybody else involved. And I leave it on sub only because I can read back through. Usually, I like to actually, and we can probably do it that way because I don't have anything to read back through on this. I'll just turn it back on completely once I talk. It makes it easier for me, and people can get so trolly, and it's really hard for my mods and other people to. It's hard for my mods to try and keep up, and it's hard for other people to deal with the trolly shit comments. Um, so the phrase is Western thought causes toxic gender roles. I didn't state what those genders were. We weren't talking about what gender was. But we will start with that. Biological sex is not binary. Biological sex can be male, female, or intersex. Intersex makes up roughly 2% of our population. Intersex can possess two X chromosomes and a penis. Or intersex can possess a womb and labia and still have an X and a Y chromosome. There are several different things with intersex. We used to call these by a few different names, and none of those different names actually attributed to all people who are intersex. Intersex can mean several different things, as I stated. That being said, if biological sex isn't binary, it's really, really stupid to make non-biological gender binary. Just stating, right? Like the idea that gender is a binary thought process really comes from the ancient Greeks, and the idea that gender is a binary thought process comes from the ancient Greeks because of the fact that the ancient Greeks really enjoyed pedophilia. They really liked young teenage boys. They would call it mentoring, right? And because they really preferred young teenage boys to women, they decided to turn women into broken men, right? Now, even the ancient Greeks didn't have a binary gender, though. They just gave us the idea that women are less than men and that there are gender differences, right? They also had, because of the fact that if you're can't be seen as a bottom, because being seen as a bottom is being seen as weaker, and you can't be seen as having sex with other men because that it is a weakness, because you might be the bottom or one of you has to be the bottom, but you prefer to have sex with young boys, so it becomes this kind of a third gender. Okay. Uh, None of it is done appropriately. All of it is done because of their pedophilic nature, and all of it is pretty disgusting. But this is where we get the idea that there are distinctive ideas of gender within Western thought. And this is also where we get our first understandings of the toxic gender roles that come about within Western thought that we are still dealing with today. Now, I'm not saying that masculine or feminine is toxic, not even close, right? Personally, myself, I embody both. I know you see me as female, but female isn't what I am. I personally embody both. And I personally find sacred masculinity and sacred femininity to both be extremely beautiful, valuable contributions. It's when we get this idea that there is only one or the other. It's when we get this idea that each gender role has a specific role to play instead of understanding that gender is about how you identify yourself, and that biological sex really has no control or understanding or thought process in what your capacity in life is, what your intelligence is, what you're good at. Let's be real. We've all met several women who could not nourish a house plant, let alone a child. And we've all met several men who are way more nurturing than any woman will ever be. Just like we've all met several women who are way more what we would define as masculine, aggressive, more inclined to violence, or more inclined to masculine thought process that we define as a masculine thought process than several of the men we know, right? This is a very typical, common thing. Uh, but we're not going to go into the binary or the non binary. We're not going to go into whether or not gender roles should exist or should not exist or what they are. We're going to go into toxic gender roles today. And what we're going to talk about today is how toxic gender roles affect all of us. Toxic gender roles really, again, start with that Greek patriarchy. And they start with that Greek patriarchy because, again, you're seeing the Greeks need to justify their pedophilia. And in their need to justify their pedophilia, this is the way that they're doing it. But they get this idea that women are less than, that women are broken men. And this is literally how they describe them. This is also where we get the word for hysteria. Hysteria, very literally meaning wandering womb. It's this idea that it's where we get the first thought process of what can bleed for 7 days and not die can't be trusted, right? We get this idea that instead of being a whole human being into and of ourselves, we are just an extension of and a broken male. Now, as we're looking at this and as we're seeing this come across, we absolutely see just how horrific this ends up being across generation upon generation upon generation of humanity, right? And as we're looking at this horror that kind of translates down through generation upon generation of humanity, what we're seeing is specific roles being subscribed to specific groups of people. And this idea that anybody who doesn't fit with inside this specific role is therefore wrong on some level. You know, there's several different ways that we've described it: traitorous, too feminine. Like, you know, we've got a lot of different ways to try and demean people. We're kind of good at that, unfortunately. And because of that, we absolutely see that is subscribed across different spaces, that it's creating a lot of trauma. And when we're looking at this, I think most people don't understand that the trauma that it's creating is not just for females, right? This isn't just traumatic and problematic. A rape culture is not just traumatic and problematic on the females within that culture, right? A rape trauma or rape culture is problematic for everybody within that culture, because let's take a look at what that really is. What it is it states that um, if you're a good man, you're owed a woman, one of your choosing. First of all, this gives you the idea that you're owed something, because nobody owes you jack shit. Okay. Get over your owed idea, right? First of all, it's this idea that you're owed something. And second of all, it's this idea that another human being should conform to your idea of what they should be instead of their own idea, and that you should have some control over this other being. So when we're looking at this, we're seeing a lot of toxicity within the relationships that this creates, right? Because this ends up creating relationships where one person feels that the other person's actions reflect negatively on them. One person feels that they can possess another person. All of these things create this negative um, aspect to relationships that cause this lack of love, right? Because if you truly love something, you're not trying to control it. You're not trying to change it. If you love me, you love me. You don't need me to change to be better for you. You love me. Why would you need change out of me if you love me? If you don't love me, then you need me to change so you can love me. But if you love me, I'm perfect the way I am. And I might not be perfect, but I'm perfect for you, right? Because you love me, because you see in me what you see me, right? Because you can't love somebody without seeing them. But we have this idea that love is a possession and that men should be in control of their significant others and their children. We also have this idea that women should, well, we we're kind of back and forth on this one. So like, don't be pussy whooped, but you better listen to her, right? Like, so it's a little bit back and forth, right? But within all of these, what we really have is this lack of ability to express emotion, this lack of ability to talk, this lack of ability to communicate. Um, and what we see is that a toxicity develops. And this toxicity that develops is toxic for both genders and creates roles within both genders that are toxic. We have this idea that the only way that a woman can get ahead in this world is if she manipulates herself through, sleeps her way to the top, or is manipulative. We have entire generations who were literally taught that the best way to control your husband or your marriage or to get the things that you want were to be manipulative. We literally have entire generations that were taught that because they were taught that that was literally the only way. And really it was. I mean, until the 90s, you could legally rape your wife. And until the 70s, a woman could open a bank account in her own name. And even today, you have to get your husband's permission to get a hysterectomy or a tubal ligation. And if your husband wants you to get a tubal ligation and you don't necessarily want to, they'll still go with your husband. So, like even today, there's still this level of control that men have in the relationship where women are taught that the only way that they can control their way out of it is by manipulating that situation through tears, usually, through guilt games, usually, right? I can think of a couple of specific people in my life who, the minute things start to look bad, will start quivering their bottom lip, right? Or will redirect it into, oh my God, how could you think that? Oh my God, like, um, and we see that this manipulation and this idea that we're weaker and this idea that all we do is raise children um, damages us, right? But we also can see where that toxic behavior is toxic not just for us, but is also toxic for the men in our life and is also toxic for our children, right? Because it's toxic behavior. Now, if we're looking at a toxic gender role with masculinity, one thing that we really see is that lack of ability to talk, that lack of ability to express feeling, that lack of ability to have friends, that lack of ability to be able to express emotion in a positive way or to understand that emotions are okay, right? And we see that with this pain and disconnect and loneliness and depression has become so great within our country that our highest self-unaliving rates are in young men because they can't deal with it anymore. They can't deal with not only constantly having to be strong or somebody else's idea of what strong is, because that's not strength. Sorry, guys. I know you think it is, just like it's not courage if you're unafraid. You have to feel fear for it to be courageous. Otherwise, you're just reckless. But because they're taught that it's not okay to express emotion, because they're taught that they constantly have to be this very falsified idea of strong, right? This increases the rates of depression and has absolutely led to higher rates of unaliving in young men within the United States than any other demographic. Um, and absolutely, psychologists and psychiatrists are absolutely equating it to the fact that young men are completely unable to reach out because young men are taught that reaching out is somehow weak, right? Not realizing the immense amounts of strength that it literally takes to open your mouth and talk, and the literal strength that it takes to do the work, to step into the shadow, to understand just how painful things are, and to try and do that healing, to try and break that cycle, right? And because we're not teaching that, and because we're teaching that any conversation or any discussion is somehow feminine, that only girls talk, that only girls love, that only girls kiss, that only girls hold hands, that only girls have emotions, other than hate or lust or aggression or lust, not hate, but only girls have motion other than aggression or lust. So you combine the idea that only girls have emotion other than aggression or lust with the idea that every man deserves a woman. If you're a good man, if you make money, if you go to work, if you do your job, if you do everything that everybody says is what makes you a good man, then you deserve a woman and you get to choose whichever one she is. Doesn't matter whether or not she chooses you, right? Combine this with all of this thought process. This is rape culture. When you teach somebody that the only feeling that they're allowed to have is lust, then why the fuck do you get pissed if lust is the only feeling that they express? If you teach people that the only feeling that they're allowed to have is lust and anger or lust and aggression, then when they mix lust and aggression or lust and anger, they're only doing what they were taught. They're only doing what was told them. And when you take that and you say, you're a good man, you deserve a woman. Everybody deserves a woman. Every good man deserves a woman. What are you teaching? Why are we so surprised that this is where we're at? Right? Why do we not see just how hard, horrific, and problematic that is, right? But, we like to think that it's something else. So that's toxic gender roles and what we were talking about with toxic gender roles today. There's a lot more on it, but I really only have 15 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and open up again to comments. And again, I've only got 15 minutes left. I'll probably only answer a few as I'm finishing this up and trying to get my way on my way. I will be back at noon next week. Today, this is the only time that they could get me in. So next week will absolutely be at noon, though. And I'll probably be able to stay on a little bit longer because I won't have that appointment I have to run for. So I will be on a little bit longer, most likely next week. And again, we'll probably just be going over recent finds or different things that I've seen that interest me. I'm doing my nails. I'm trying to experiment. I have a thing next weekend for my partner's birthday, and I'm going totally Delftware, and because I have a pair of shoes that look like Delftware as well, and so I'm trying it out and seeing if I like it or what it looks like before next week. It takes me forever. I believe that, man, Miranda. I see a lot of that. There's a lot of mascot issues still. I'm just always so surprised about the mascot issues that we're still having. Like you would think, you would think, but really it all goes down to with the fact that there's just that lack of understanding that Turtle Islanders are still here, that Turtle Island Indigenous people are absolutely still here, right? That lack of knowledge that we're not extinct, that just, is so prevalent. I get so frustrated. Like, I'm so glad that we are uplifting and listening to different marginalized groups within the country, but I feel like it's always other marginalized groups. It's never Turtle Island Indigenous people that we're listening to, right? It's never a conversation of we should be listening to Turtle Island Indigenous people. It's a conversation of we should be listening to this group or that group. And that's wonderful. And I agree that we should be, but I also think, what the fuck? Like, when is it going to be we should listen to the people who were here first about their space, right? When is it going to be that conversation? Sorry, that's on my mind today because of something I was watching, because, we're not. So I've probably brought it up a couple times. But I find it very well, it's something that's on my mind for a hot minute actually, but it was doubly so today. I'm just trying to make sure that there are no questions before I have to take off, that any answers that were needed were covered. As I'm trying to figure out how I want to do this last little bit. So I hope for everybody that the information today was helpful and gave them what they needed. Uh, Again, the website for both of these, or the articles for both of these actual conversations and the other stuff, or the articles that spark these conversations, are up on the website. There are articles about the other conversations too. They're just under the biography because they're a little bit different, or conversations that we've had before as well. Um, that's what we'll do. I have been working on the children's book. I know that there were a lot of people in the live the other day when it crapped out on me, and I actually ended up going a whole new route. And so I'm working on making sure that I have the final pieces that I need to restart it with the whole new route. Well, not a whole new route. I'm just using a different technique so that the route that I am using will come together better. But hopefully, I know I can get the rest of my tools this week, or well, probably actually tomorrow. So I will hopefully get started with it tomorrow and have it ready to go, finalized by the end of the week. I can't say for certain because I don't know all the processes after I get the process itself that takes like a day done, and how long those are going to take. But hopefully the week, if I can get it all together. Things like the children's book and stuff like that are a little bit different though. Any Turtle Island Indigenous interested in adopting a Viking. You know, you could probably find a lot more people willing to adopt a Viking. But with this children's book and stuff, they will cost a little bit. I mean, I'm never gonna, I think, or I hope that I'll never like cause things to cost a whole lot, but mainly just because that my whole life being a writer was one of those things, right? Like, even with my archaeological degree, I pursued it with the understanding that I was going to use it to write and to teach different things. But knowing that the medium that I wanted to use for teaching was the written word, because of the fact that it's something that, so even if it costs money, it's still going to be cheaper than a degree, you know? And so it will cost a little bit, but probably not exorbitantly, just a little bit more than the other stuff. I'm trying to get, well, and I don't think it really needs to go free through there anymore because we have the free up on the site. But there is the Widda Ord up free on the site. It's just through Google Books. It's nothing fancy, since Amazon won't let me do it free. If you want the hard copy is still on Amazon for free, or not for free, but for a couple bucks, because they set the price. I get nothing out of that one, but that's the prices that they had to set on it to get their money out of it, to cost for the print. But I have been able to do out a couple videos and put a couple of things together. Yes. So the children's book will probably mainly be print, just because of the fact that I don't think it's going to translate as well into a digital content. Literally, I'm taking a picture and progressively drawing a scene, and associating the words with the progressively drawn scene. And so I think that it will work way better as a actual physical copy than it will as a digital copy. I'm not even sure how well it will work as a digital copy. Of course, I'll try and make sure that it is a Kindle edition copy as well, just because I know that that makes it a lot easier for some people. But the focus with the children's book is actually a physical copy. And it's 21 pages. So it won't be super thick, but I mean, for a small children's book, it's semi thick. And it's kind of a soft teaching of grounding and centering. Like, it doesn't talk about grounding and centering, but it kind of talks about connecting and grounding and centering in a more day-to-day action thing than actually, like putting the effort into the thought that this is what you're supposed to do. I don't like for me, because it's so problematic for me to have like I don't do routine very well. It's hard for me to create routine and maintain routine. For me, anything that I have to do as a routine or as a ritual becomes problematic because I I have a hard time doing it, right? Like, I can't even take I've been taking my ADD meds actually. So that's probably the only med in my life I've ever taken on a regular basis and been able to like actually like maintain a steady rhythm of taking the medication. So I like things that don't have a lot of ritual or routine to them because of the fact then they're easy enough to incorporate into the small moments, like when you're just thinking, right? Instead of something that you have to plan out how you're going to make it a part of your day. And so it's more about, just living and figuring out how to do those things within just living in a simple way, I guess. I am very lucky to have medication. I went off it like I think it was the month before last or last month. Like it was midway through last month, my medications, like there was a problem with the post office and they didn't get them delivered to me. And it was not easy. I thought it was going to be easier than it was. Like I thought I was going to be okay. And I was not, like, it was not functionally very well for me. Okay. I like 4 more minutes, 3 more minutes. Are there any other questions before I go today? Thank you all for joining me and for listening to my wild rambles. My word. Um, and I hope that the rest of your day is beautiful and bright and that gives you a little bit of peace and joy. I hope to. It should be pretty good. I get to go and watch one of my bonus kids get a tattoo on Saturday. Otherwise, my week is pretty chill, which I really enjoy. I'm like staying at home, chilling out. Tried to go out to the bar this weekend and it was not working for either of us, I think. It's like, yeah, no, let's just go home. It is not the karaoke night we wanted it to be. Thank you, Miranda. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off, everybody. Again, may the rest of your day be bright and beautiful, and may the rest of your week be bright and beautiful. And I will see you this time next week. Have a great one. Bye, everybody. Hey, gorgeous. Boy. Did I only have that? I might have had that on mod or on subscribers only, and I didn't realize I did. Bye, everybody. Much love. Have a great one.